The mess hall of the Coalition warship Silent Horizon was loud with noise and careless joy. Metal cups clashed, harsh alien laughter echoed off steel walls. For a short moment, the war felt far away. Soldiers from many worlds filled the long tables. Some had scales, some had glowing eyes, some had more limbs than a human could count. They shared stories, drinks, and memories from battles already survived. Only one seat sat apart from the rest. An old human man sat there quietly. His name was Elias Ward. At 58, his hair had turned gray, cut short and neat. His face carried deep lines, not from age alone, but from years of loss, fire, and survival. A thin scar crossed his throat, half hidden by his uniform collar. He ate slowly, carefully, as if every movement had meaning. He was the only human on the ship. To the galaxy, humans were still new, barely a century since first contact. Compared to ancient starfaring species, humanity was young and fragile. At the center of the room stood Commander Rax Toll, a towering warrior with 4 arms and armor-like skin that shimmered blue under the lights. His kind had fought wars before humans had learned to write. Rax Toll raised his cup high. "Let us play a game," he announced with a sharp grin. "We share the strangest myths from other species. The most foolish story wins." Cheers erupted. One by one, soldiers mocked the beliefs of distant worlds, laughing at gods, legends, and ancient heroes. Then a tall, silver-skinned officer activated a hologram. "But nothing," she said with a smile, "beats human myths." Images appeared in the air, ancient drawings, old texts, heroes fighting monsters, warriors standing alone against armies, gods struck down by mortal hands. The room exploded with laughter. "They believed men could fight gods," one soldier shouted. "They thought love could bring the dead back," another laughed. Commander Rax Toll shook his head. "Humans break easily. One strong blow and they fall. Short lives, weak bodies." Some turned to Elias. He did not react. He kept eating. The laughter grew louder. "They invented heroes because they needed hope," someone said. "Stories to make their tiny lives feel important." Elias finally looked up. His eyes were calm. Too calm. Rax Toll noticed. "Tell us, human," he said, half smiling. "Do you believe these stories? Do you really think your people fought monsters and survived the impossible?" Silence fell. Elias wiped his hands slowly. "I think," he said quietly. "People remember what they must," Rax Toll frowned. "Meaning?" Elias stood. "Myths are not dreams," he said. "Sometimes they are instructions." Laughter returned, louder than before. The human turned and walked out. No one noticed his hands trembling. No one noticed the way he paused outside the door, closed his eyes, and breathed like a man preparing for something terrible. Because Elias Ward knew one truth the galaxy had forgotten. The universe always tests you after you laugh. And when it does, human myths stop being funny. And somewhere deep in the dark between the stars, something had already begun moving toward the ship. The laughter in the mess hall did not stop after Elias Ward left. If anything, it grew louder. Soldiers repeated his words in mocking voices. "Myths are instructions," one said, bending over in fake wisdom. Another laughed. "Humans speak in riddles because they have nothing real to say." Elias heard none of it. He walked through the narrow corridors of Silent Horizon, boots steady against the metal floor. The ship hummed softly around him, a sound he had learned to sleep through decades ago. To others, it was background noise. To him, it was a living thing, always warning, always listening. He reached the medical bay. Inside, the lights were bright and calm. 12 wounded soldiers lay in beds. Different species, different worlds, same pain. Elias moved from one to the next, checking monitors, adjusting drips, whispering reassurance in a voice so soft it barely carried. He treated them all the same. No ranks, no species, just lives that still mattered. A young officer watched him from the doorway. Her name was Lieutenant Saris. Half her face was covered with cybernetic implants that glowed faintly as they processed data faster than any natural brain. Her species was known for logic, numbers, and cold reason, and Elias Ward made no sense to her. She had read his file, 40 years of combat service, 17 survival events marked statistically impossible, 47 recorded injuries, declared clinically dead, 4 times. And yet, he was still only a corporal. Sarah stepped inside. "You do not act like other humans," she said. Elias did not look up. "Pain does that." "They laugh at your stories," she continued, "at your history. Why did you not defend yourself?" He finished adjusting a bandage before answering. "Because they are not ready." "Ready for what?" He finally met her eyes. "For the truth." Saris frowned. "Truth is data, evidence. Your myths have neither." Elias gave a small smile. "That's what everyone thinks." He washed his hands slowly. "Do you know why humans tell stories about heroes?" "To inspire children," Saris said. "To make weakness feel like strength." "No," Elias said gently. "To remember how to survive." She studied him. "You truly believe your myths happened?" "I know they did," he replied. "Not exactly as told, but close enough." Before Saris could respond, the ship shuddered. Hard. The lights flickered. An alarm screamed through the corridors. Saris's implants flashed red as data flooded her mind. Her voice went tight. Multiple breaches detected. Enemy boarding units. Elias did not flinch. "Which decks?" he asked. Saris paused, then swallowed. "Lower decks," she said, "near the medical bay." The wounded soldiers stirred in fear. Saris looked at Elias. "Those enemies, they are shock troops. One can destroy an entire squad." Elias moved toward the supply cabinet, already reaching for equipment. "Then we don't let them reach these beds." "You cannot fight them," Saris said. "You are one human." Elias turned to her, eyes steady. "No," he said. "I am a promise." The ship shook again. Screams echoed through the halls. Elias stepped toward the door. Saris felt something she had never felt before. Not doubt, not confusion, fear. Not for the human walking into danger, but for whatever was about to meet him. Because the first enemy had already entered the corridor, and Elias Ward was about to remind the galaxy why humans never run when someone is behind them. The corridor outside the medical bay glowed red under emergency lights. Smoke hung in the air. The metal floor vibrated with distant explosions. Somewhere above, weapons fired. Somewhere closer, something heavy moved. Elias Ward stood alone in the hallway. Behind him, 12 wounded soldiers lay helpless. Some were unconscious. Some were awake and terrified. None of them could fight. None of them could run. In front of him, a shape emerged from the smoke. It was tall, too tall, nearly 8 feet of black armor that looked grown, not built. Its claws scraped against the walls as it moved, slow and confident. Yellow eyes burned from a skull-like face. The shock trooper had found him. It laughed. The sound was deep and rough, like stone grinding against stone. "Move aside, little creature," it said. "We hunt the broken." Elias did not move. He reached down and lifted a long metal bar torn from a damaged wall panel. It was heavy, crude. Not a weapon meant for war. But it would do. "No," Elias said calmly. The creature tilted its head. "You will die." Elias nodded once. "Maybe." Then the monster charged. It was fast, faster than any human should be able to react to. The claws slashed through the space where Elias's head had been a second earlier. He stepped aside, not quickly, but correctly. Years of instinct guided him, not strength. He swung the metal bar. It struck the creature's knee with a loud crack. The shock trooper roared and stumbled. Elias struck again, and again. The creature recovered, grabbing him and hurling him against the wall. Pain exploded through his chest. He felt ribs crack. His breath left him in a sharp gasp. Still he stood. The creature raised a claw to finish him. Elias reached into his medical kit. He slammed a high-dose sedative injector straight into the creature's mouth and triggered it. The shock trooper collapsed, choking and twitching. Elias leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Then he heard it. Footsteps. More than one. 3 more shock troopers entered the corridor. They stopped when they saw the fallen warrior. Their yellow eyes turned to Elias. For the first time, they hesitated. Elias tightened his grip on the metal bar. Blood dripped from his lip. His hands shook, not from fear, but from damage. He whispered softly, barely audible. Still standing, he told himself. They attacked together. One claw sliced his arm. Another slammed him into the floor. Pain blurred his vision. Something in his shoulder popped out of place. Elias screamed, then forced himself silent. He rolled, grabbed a loose pipe from the ceiling, and jammed it into the creature's throat. Another rushed him. He ducked low, slamming his weight into its legs, toppling it into the wall. The corridor became chaos. Metal, blood, smoke, screams. Minutes passed, then longer. When the corridor finally went quiet, 2 shock troopers lay dead. One crawled away. Elias dropped to one knee. His arm hung useless. His chest burned with every breath. Blood soaked his uniform. He looked back at the sealed medical bay door, still intact, still safe. Elias pushed himself back to his feet, because he knew something they did not. This was only the beginning. And deeper in the ship, the rest of the shock troops were learning the same terrible lesson. This human was not running, and he was not done. The corridor no longer looked like part of a ship. It looked like a battlefield. The walls were torn open. Sparks fell like rain. Blood, dark and thick, streaked the floor. The red emergency lights flickered, making shadows jump and twist. Elias Ward stood in the center of it all. Barely. His left arm hung loose, useless. His right hand gripped a broken length of pipe. His breathing came in sharp, painful gasps. Every inhale felt like fire. Every exhale felt borrowed. He should have fallen already. He knew that. His body knew that. But the door behind him was still sealed. That mattered more. Another shock trooper appeared at the far end of the corridor, then another, then another. 5 this time. They moved slower now, cautious. Their glowing eyes studied the bodies on the floor, studied the blood, studied the human who still stood between them and their prey. One of them spoke, voice low and uneasy. "This one does not flee." "No," another replied. "It does not die." They spread out, trying to surround him. Elias backed up until his shoulders touched the medical bay door. He could feel the faint vibration of life support machines on the other side. 12 heartbeats. 12 reasons. He whispered their names. Not because it gave him strength. Because it reminded him why he could not stop. The first trooper lunged. Elias stepped forward instead of back. The pipe shattered against the creature's skull. The impact jarred his bones, sent pain screaming through his arm. The creature reeled, but did not fall. A claw pierced Elias's side. He gasped, blood spilling warm and fast. Still, he grabbed the arm and twisted with everything he had left. Bone cracked. The creature howled. Another struck him from behind. Elias hit the floor hard. His vision swam. Darkness pressed in from the edges. "Get up." He rolled aside just as claws slammed where his head had been. He reached blindly and found something heavy. A fire extinguisher. He swung it like a hammer. Once, twice, 3 times. The last blow crushed the creature's head with a wet sound that echoed through the corridor. The others stepped back. They were afraid now. Elias dragged himself upright, leaning against the door. His legs trembled violently. Blood soaked the floor beneath him. "You can stop," one of them said. "Your body is finished." Elias laughed weakly. "So was mine," he said. "Years ago." They attacked again, but not together. One at a time now. Careful, slow. Elias fought with whatever he could grab. A loose panel, a broken light, his own weight. His teeth when his hands failed. Minutes blurred into hours. Pain became distant. Time lost meaning. All that remained was standing. When he could no longer stand, he leaned. When he could no longer lean, he crawled back to his feet. The shock troopers began retreating between attacks. They had never seen this before, a creature that refused to break. Elias's vision dimmed. His hearing faded. He pressed his forehead against the door, smearing it red. "Still here," he whispered. And as the hours dragged on, the enemy finally understood this was no longer a fight. It was a warning. Time stopped making sense. Elias Ward no longer knew how long he had been standing in that corridor. Minutes and hours blurred together until only pain remained. Pain and the sound of his own breathing, wet, broken, stubborn. His legs shook constantly now. One knee refused to lock. His vision narrowed into a tunnel, red lights smearing into shadows. Blood soaked his uniform, dried, then soaked it again. He should have been dead. He knew that too. But the door behind him still held. That was enough. Another shock trooper approached, only one. They never came in groups anymore. It moved slowly, carefully, stepping around the bodies of its fallen kin. Its eyes stayed locked on Elias, watching every breath, every sway. "You are finished," it said. "Your heart will stop soon." Elias wiped blood from his eyes with trembling fingers. "Hasn't yet," he whispered. The creature lunged. Elias did not dodge this time. He caught the attack on his shoulder. Something shattered inside him. Pain exploded so violently that he screamed despite himself. His arm went numb. His body collapsed to one knee. The creature raised its claws. Elias grabbed a jagged piece of metal from the floor and drove it upward with everything he had left. The blade punched through armor, through flesh. The shock trooper froze, then fell. Elias slumped forward, barely holding himself upright with one hand against the wall. He was losing now. Not the fight, his body. His heartbeat fluttered, his lungs burned, his hands refused to close properly. He could feel himself slipping, system by system, piece by piece. Behind the door, a wounded soldier cried out in fear. The sound cut through the fog in Elias's mind like a knife. He turned his head toward the door. "I'm still here," he whispered hoarsely. "You're safe." He pressed his forehead against the metal. Memories came then. Not battle. Home. A small kitchen on Earth. Warm light. A child laughing. A promise made before leaving. "I'll come back." He laughed softly. "Liar," he muttered to himself. Footsteps echoed again. 2 shock troopers this time. They stopped when they saw him. He wasn't standing straight anymore. He leaned heavily against the door, barely upright. Blood pooled at his feet. "You cannot stop us now," one said. Elias slowly reached down and picked up the last thing within reach. A broken pipe sharpened into a crude spear. He held it with shaking hands. "Try," he said. They rushed him together. Elias screamed, not in fear, but in effort. He drove the spear forward, impaling the first creature through the chest. The second struck him hard, throwing him against the door with a crack that echoed down the corridor. Elias slid down, collapsing to the floor. Darkness rushed in. His body finally gave out, but even on his knees, even half-conscious, he did not move away from the door. And as Elias Ward slipped closer to death, reinforcements were only minutes away. But the question remained. Would he still be alive when they arrived? Elias Ward drifted in and out of darkness. Sounds came first, distant, warped, like voices underwater. His heart beat unevenly, slow and fast at the same time. Every breath scraped his lungs raw. He was still on his knees. He realized that with a strange sense of pride. The corridor smelled of smoke and blood. The red lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows over fallen bodies. The floor was slick beneath his boots. He tried to stand. His legs screamed in protest. He failed, so he leaned his back harder against the medical bay door and forced himself upright inch by inch. His hands slid, leaving dark red streaks on the metal. "Not yet," he whispered. "Not yet." Another shock trooper approached, only one again. It moved differently than the others, slower but smarter. Its head tilted as it studied him, as if trying to understand what kind of creature could still be alive in this condition. "You are broken," it said. "Your body has surrendered." Elias laughed weakly. "My body," he said, "isn't in charge anymore." The creature lunged. Elias raised the crude spear with both hands, one barely responding. The impact sent a shock through his bones, so strong his vision went white. The spear pierced the creature's armor but snapped in half. They collided. Elias felt claws tear into his back. He screamed, not holding it back this time. His knees buckled again, and both of them crashed to the floor. The shock trooper was stronger, faster. It pinned him down, claws rising for the killing strike. Elias could barely move, but his hand found something small near his belt. A final injector. Not medicine. Adrenaline. He jammed it into his thigh and triggered it. Pain exploded into fire. His heart slammed into motion. His vision sharpened. His muscles screamed, but they obeyed. He roared. Not like a man, but like something cornered and dangerous. He drove his elbow into the creature's throat. Once, twice, again. The shock trooper staggered back. Elias crawled to his feet, swaying violently. His world spun. Blood poured freely now. His hands trembled so badly he could barely lift them. But he stood. The creature backed away. Then it turned and fled. Elias watched it disappear down the corridor. Only then did he let himself slide down the door. He stayed upright only because the metal held him. He looked at his hands. They were barely recognizable, swollen, bloody, broken. "I kept it," he whispered. "I kept the promise." His eyes closed. Behind the door, the wounded soldiers were still alive. That thought warmed him more than any medicine ever could. Footsteps echoed again, many this time. Voices shouted, weapons charged. Elias tried to open his eyes. He managed a sliver. Figures rushed toward him through the smoke. He saw shapes, heard shouting. Someone grabbed him. He tried to speak, to tell them the door never opened, to tell them the wounded were safe. But his body finally chose rest. His heart stuttered, then stopped. And as Elias Ward slipped into darkness, the reinforcements arrived, only to discover what one human had done alone. The coalition reinforcements burst into the lower deck with weapons raised. They expected chaos. They expected death. They expected to find the medical bay destroyed and the wounded torn apart. Instead, they found silence. The corridor was barely recognizable. Walls were shredded. The floor was cracked and soaked dark with blood. Broken armor and bodies lay scattered in every direction. Massive shock troopers, some still smoking from recent death. 11 of them, dead. At the far end of the corridor, leaning against the sealed medical bay door, was Elias Ward, still upright, still blocking the entrance. Blood covered him from head to toe. His uniform was torn beyond recognition. His head was bowed slightly, chin resting against his chest. For a moment, no one spoke. A young soldier stepped forward slowly. "Sir," she whispered. No response. A medic rushed in and pressed fingers to Elias's neck. Her face went pale. "He's gone," she said quietly. "Heart failure." Silence fell heavier than any explosion. Then, from behind the sealed door, came a weak voice. Is it over?" Every head snapped toward the medical bay. The door was opened. 12 wounded soldiers stared out in disbelief, fear, confusion, then understanding. "He stayed," one whispered. "He never moved," another said. "He talked to us," a third added. "Told us we were safe." Lieutenant Saris stood frozen. Her implants scanned the scene again and again, running impossible calculations. 6 hours. 1 human. 14 shock troopers. The math refused to make sense. Commander Rax Toll arrived moments later. His massive frame filled the corridor. The moment his eyes landed on Elias, something changed in him. The arrogance was gone. The mockery was gone. He knelt, forearms lowered, head bowed, a warrior's gesture. "He held the line," Rax Toll said softly. "Alone." Medics carefully lowered Elias to the floor. As they moved him, his hand slipped open. In his palm, a child's photo, creased, old, smudged with blood. Rax Toll stared at it. "This," he said slowly, "was no myth." Saris finally spoke, her voice unsteady. "He should have fallen in the first minute," she said, "then the first hour, then the second." She looked at Elias's broken body. "But he didn't." Rax Toll closed his eyes. "The humans tell stories of heroes who stand against impossible odds," he said. "We laughed." He opened his eyes again, burning with something new. "We were wrong," a medic suddenly shouted. "Wait, heartbeat detected." Hope slammed into the corridor like a shockwave. Machines whirred. Medics moved fast. Elias was lifted onto a stretcher, rushed back into the medical bay he had defended with his life. As the doors closed again, Rax Toll remained kneeling. "He is not weak," he said. "He is a warning." Saris nodded slowly. "The galaxy laughed at human myths," she said. Her voice hardened. "It won't again." And as Elias Ward fought for life in surgery, the footage of that corridor began spreading across the fleet, changing how the galaxy would see humans forever. Elias Ward woke to quiet. Not the sharp screams of alarms, not the roar of battle, just soft light and steady breathing. For a long moment he thought he was dead. Then pain arrived, slow, deep, everywhere. He groaned faintly. Immediately voices rushed in. "He's awake. Careful. Don't move him. Easy, Corporal." Elias opened his eyes. White ceiling, medical lights, tubes running into his arms, machines humming in gentle rhythm. He was in the medical bay. The same one. He swallowed hard. "The door," he whispered. A shadow moved closer. "All 12 survived," said Commander Rax Toll. Elias turned his head slightly. The massive commander stood beside the bed, posture straight, arms at his sides. No armor, no weapons, just respect. "They never breached," Rax Toll continued. "You kept them out." Elias closed his eyes. "Good," he breathed. The room was full. Lieutenant Saris stood near the wall, her glowing implants dimmed out of courtesy. Doctors from several species watched quietly. Soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, saying nothing. No laughter, no jokes, only silence. Rax Toll spoke again. "The doctors say you should not be alive. Your heart stopped twice, your lungs collapsed, your bones—" He shook his head slowly. "3 warriors of my kind would not have survived what you endured." Elias smiled weakly. We're stubborn. Rax Toll stepped forward and did something no one expected. He bowed deeply. My people have fought for 10,000 years, he said. We believed strength was measured by muscle and armor. We believed humans were fragile. His voice lowered. We were wrong. Saris stepped forward now. The footage has spread, she said, across the fleet, across command. Tactical divisions are rewriting doctrine. Elias frowned slightly. Because of me? No, Saris replied. Because of what you represent. She hesitated, then asked quietly. The myths, they weren't exaggerations, were they? Elias looked around the room, at the faces, at the disbelief, at the fear mixed with awe. No, he said. They're memories. Rax Toll nodded slowly. You stood alone for 6 hours, he said. No armor, no superior weapons. Why? Elias turned his head toward the sealed door across the room. Because someone was behind me, he said, and I promised they'd be safe. The words settled heavily in the room. One of the wounded soldiers, now sitting up, spoke with a trembling voice. He talked to us, she said, even when he could barely stand, told us stories, said we'd go home. Elias smiled faintly. Someone once told me the same. Rax Toll straightened. The galaxy will not forget this, he said. Your myths are no longer jokes. They are lessons. Elias closed his eyes again, exhaustion pulling him under. Good, he whispered. That's all they ever were. But the galaxy was only beginning to ask the most dangerous question of all. If this is what one human can do, what happens when they fight together? The warship Silent Horizon returned to Coalition space weeks later. Repairs crews swarmed over its wounded hull. Engineers patched scars left by battle, but some damage could not be erased. Not from the ship, not from the people who served on it. Word had already spread. At first, many refused to believe it. One human, old, a medic, 6 hours against elite shock troops. It sounded like a story, a myth. Then the footage circulated. No edits, no filters, no heroic music. Just raw security recordings in red emergency light. Elias Ward standing, falling, standing again, bleeding, shaking, refusing to move. Laughter died across the fleet. In strategy rooms, commanders watched in silence. Tactical analysts replayed the same moments again and again, searching for tricks, hidden weapons, secret enhancements. They found none. Only a man who would not quit. Coalition doctrine began to change. Humans were reassigned, not to the front of assaults, but to defensive holds, evacuation corridors, medical bays, refugee routes, places where retreat was not an option. Someone finally understood the truth. Humans did not fight best when advancing. They fought best when protecting. Lieutenant Saris stood in one such briefing room, listening as senior officers debated. If one human can do this, one commander said carefully, what happens when 100 are placed together? The room fell silent. No one answered. Because no one liked the answer forming in their minds. Elias Ward remained in recovery. He could walk again now, slowly, leaning on a support frame. His body would heal. It always did. But the scars stayed, just as he wanted. Commander Rax Toll visited him one last time before reassignment orders were issued. You have changed the fleet, Rax Toll said. Some fear you now. Elias shrugged slightly. Fear keeps people honest. Rax Toll studied him. Your stories, your myths. Warnings to whom? To anyone who thinks humans break easily. Rax Toll exhaled slowly. There are those who ask what else you've done. What other stories we dismissed? Elias smiled faintly. That list is long, he said, and unfinished. Rax Toll bowed his head again, then turned to leave. As he reached the door, he paused. Corporal Ward, he said, if another war comes, If the galaxy faces something worse, Elias met his gaze. We'll stand, he said simply. After Raxtol left, Elias looked out the viewport at the stars. Endless, cold, waiting. He thought of Earth, of children hearing stories before sleep, of heroes and monsters and impossible odds. He understood now what his grandmother had meant all those years ago. Stories weren't meant to comfort. They were meant to prepare. Somewhere out there, enemies were watching the same footage, learning the same lesson, and wondering the same thing. Because if one human could hold the line alone, the galaxy had to face the final truth. Humanity was never weak. It was patient. Elias Ward stood at the transfer dock alone. The station was busy, but a quiet space seemed to follow him wherever he went. Soldiers from many species passed by, slowed, and then stopped. Some bowed their heads, others placed a hand over their chest in respect. No one laughed anymore. Elias waited calmly. His body was still healing. He walked with care now, every step measured. The scars remained across his arms, his side, his back. He had asked the doctors not to remove them. They remind me, he had said. Of what? They asked. Of promises kept. A young human private approached him, fresh uniform, nervous eyes. She couldn't have been more than 20. Corporal Ward? She asked. Yes, Elias replied. I just wanted to say, thank you, she said. I watched the footage. Everyone has. Elias nodded gently. Then you saw enough. She hesitated. They call it a legend now. Elias smiled softly. Then they missed the point. Across the dock, Commander Raxtol watched from a distance. He did not interrupt. He had learned when silence mattered. The private swallowed. They say human myths are warnings. They are, Elias said. Not threats, not boasts. Then what are they warnings about? Elias looked out through the viewport at the stars. Endless darkness, endless possibility. They warn that when everything fails, he said, when plans collapse and strength runs out, humans don't stop. The private nodded slowly. What happens next? Elias turned toward the transport ramp. Next, he said, someone else stands. He paused, then added quietly, that's how it's always been. The transport doors opened. Before Elias stepped inside, Raxtol approached him. The commander stood tall, proud, but his voice was calm. My people once believed strength was about power, Raxtol said. Now we know better. Elias met his gaze. Strength is about staying, he said, when leaving would be easier. Raxtol bowed deeply. Your species will never be underestimated again. Elias shook his head. That's not what matters, he said. What matters is that when the galaxy needs someone to hold the line, humans won't ask why. The doors closed behind him. As the transport pulled away, the station returned to its rhythm, but something had changed. Across the coalition, training manuals were rewritten, defensive strategies were redefined, and in mess halls where human myths had once been mocked, soldiers now asked to hear them, not for entertainment, for understanding, because they had learned the truth too late to laugh anymore. Human myths were never about gods or monsters. They were about ordinary people who refused to step aside, about hands that kept shaking but never let go, about hearts that kept beating long after they should have stopped. And somewhere, on countless worlds, a simple rule was quietly passed down. Never assume the human is the weakest one in the room. They are only the last to fall. The end. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.